Hey, this is Sally's Book Talk, where we bring you the best books from around the world every day. Today's featured book is the FBI's Psychological Profiling Text. The author, Robert T. Ressler, was a legendary figure at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Since the 1980s, Ressler has been renowned in the field of criminal psychological analysis. Colleagues marveled at his ability to deduce criminals' hair, color, and vehicle type just by visiting crime scenes. This book documents major cases Ressler solved during his 20-year FBI career, like the vampire killer case. In solving cases like the son of Sam, Ressler pioneered criminal psychological profiling techniques. By analyzing criminal behavior patterns, he could predict suspects' appearances and even future crimes. Fans of the novel Psychological Crime or TV series Criminal Minds will recognize this profiling profession. Ressler established the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit that formalized criminal profiling. He also coined the term serial killer. Dr. Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs was inspired by cases Ressler solved. Co-author Tom Schachtman is a professional writer. Their collaboration created this seminal work. Published in 8 languages, it became a multi-year bestseller with over 1 million copies sold in Japan alone. The book contains 12 chapters, exploring psychological profiling origins and serial killer motivations, featuring paranoid and delusional criminals. These criminals became infamous in American crime history. The book also examines humanity's dark side and socially induced deviant behaviors. We'll reveal profiling and serial killer secrets through 3 key perspectives. First, what is criminal profiling, and how does it work? Second, what are the origins of serial killers and their different types? Third, what factors contribute to the making of a serial killer? First question, what is criminal profiling and how is it conducted? Criminal profiling is a scientific investigative method. It analyzes crime scenes, victims, and details to infer suspect characteristics like gender, age, ethnicity, and occupation. For example, misspellings in writings might indicate a suspect's education level, while locations on victims reveal a suspect's height and handedness. How does profiling actually work? What information do crime scene details truly reveal? Let's examine Ressler's first profiling success. The vampire killer case. In 1978, Sacramento witnessed a vampire killer who murdered 7 victims. The killer earned his name by dismembering victims and consuming flesh, blood. First victim was 22-year-old Mrs. Wallen, 3 months pregnant when killed at home. Her upper garments were removed with deep abdominal wounds and mutilated body. Some organs were missing. A gruesome scene overwhelmed local police, forcing them to seek Ressler's help. At the scene, Ressler created his first official criminal profile. He described, white male, 27. Underweight, malnourished appearance, lives in messy residence where evidence might be found. Has psychiatric history with medication, socially isolated, unemployed, possibly on disability, likely high school droso with paranoid disorders. If not living alone, possibly with parents, though unlikely. No military service, probable delusional conditions. How did Ressler reach these conclusions? First, in sexual crime cases, Perpetrators are typically male and usually target victims of the same race. Additionally, offenders in such cases are predominantly white males, aged 20 to 30. Given that victim, Mrs. Wallen, was a 22-year-old pregnant white woman, Ressler concluded the killer was likely a white male in his 20s. Secondly, behavioral science unit research categorizes killers into two types, those following logical patterns. The second type commits completely random acts. Police reports and crime scene photos revealed the killer's brutal, patternless attack on Mrs. Wallen. This led Ressler to classify the killer as type 2, typically severely mentally ill. Thirdly, studies show body type correlates with mental state. Slender or frail individuals are more prone to decipher symptom. Thus, Ressler deduced the killer was thin, underdeveloped physically, with poor appetite common in schizophrenia. He concluded, the killer appeared malnourished. Fourthly, mental state manifests in physical appearance. Such individuals often neglect hygiene and struggle socially. Therefore, most remain single. These factors indicated the killer lived in squalor. Military would reject such disorganized individuals. Thus, the killer likely never served, possibly finished high school before mental breakdown. College was improbable, with only menial jobs attainable, which they'd likely fail due to social ineptitude. Most lived isolated on government assistance. After Ressler's first profile, more gruesome murders occurred nearby. Horrifyingly, evidence showed the killer drank victims' blood, prompting Ressler to refine his profile. The similar mutilation patterns in subsequent female victims clearly indicated sexual motives. Crime scene evidence reinforced Ressler's belief in a schizophrenic young killer. A stolen vehicle found nearby suggested proximity to the perpetrator's residence. Ressler further suggested the killer had fetishistic tendencies, likely stealing female undergarments for sexual gratification. Guided by this profile, police arrested 28-year-old Richard Chase, who matched all characteristics. Chase confessed to hearing commanding voices ordering him to kill before each murder. He drank victims' blood, believing it counteracted imagined poisoning. Hence the vampire killer moniker. Investigators found Chase's calendar marking murder dates as today, with 44 future dates similarly labeled. Without profiling intervention, 44 potential murders might have occurred. These cases demonstrate criminal profiling's crucial role in investigations. Profiling narrows suspect pools, sometimes surpassing forensic accuracy. In a Chase murder case, profiling identified prime suspect David Meerhofer, a 23-year-old Vietnam veteran living alone. Though neighbors described Meerhofer as pleasant and polite, he remained the profile's focus. Despite passing polygraph tests, Ressler maintained suspicion, knowing skilled offenders can deceive lie detectors. In this case, suspect Meerhofer murdered both a 7-year-old girl and an 80-year-old woman who rejected his marriage proposal. He repeatedly called victims' families with phone traces, revealing illegal line connections. Police found Meerhofer learned telephone wiretapping during Vietnam service, but evidence remained insufficient. Profilers concluded his calls indicated possessive obsession, prompting arranged contact with victim's mother. Though Meerhofer showed no guilt during meeting, the mother later recognized his voice in threatening calls. This testimony secured search warrants revealing victims' belongings in Meerhofer's home. Ressler maintained that meticulous criminals can't deceive profilers' psychological insights. Profiling requires lifelong learning. Due to violent criminals' complex psychology, these offenders typically seek psychological fulfillment rather than financial gain through violent acts. This concludes our first topic. Profiling uses crime scene analysis to identify suspects. Ressler's cases popularized serial killer terminology for multi-victim offenders. Now we explore the origins and characteristics of serial killers. First, how Ressler developed the serial killer concept. Ressler first proposed this term at a UK Police Academy seminar, inspired by the crime series The Phantom. Like movie sequels attracting audiences, serial killers chase escalating thrills while perfecting their methods. Thus they become addicted to the euphoria of killing. A common misconception suggests serial killers have split personalities that could be cured, but the book refutes this. Just as hair grows naturally, serial killers' core existence revolves around killing, an insatiable compulsion. This dark reality drives continuous advancement in criminal profiling techniques. Are all serial killers alike? Ressler categorized them into 3 distinct types based on behavioral patterns. Type 1. Meticulous planners executing premeditated crimes. Labeled organized offenders, contrasting with impulsive disorganized offenders. Some exhibit both traits, classified as mixed-type offenders. We'll examine these categories. Modus operandi and victim selection. Organized offenders operate systematically, never acting spontaneously. Their key characteristic is meticulous crime planning. They mentally rehearse crimes repeatedly, developing specific victim criteria. The book's child murder case exemplifies this. The killer nurtured murder fantasies since childhood. Ressler found organized criminals typically target strangers using specific victim selection criteria. Factors like age, appearance, occupation, hairstyle, or lifestyle guide their choices. Notorious example: David Berkowitz, son of Sam, who killed 6 and wounded 7 in New York City. Berkowitz claimed his neighbor, Sam's demon-possessed dog, commanded him to kill, hence the nickname. His actual motive stemmed from maternal hatred and inability to form relationships with women. He specifically targeted lone female drivers or couples, deriving sexual excitement from killings. Organized offenders often display high intelligence and verbal skills to manipulate victims. Deception tactics include offering rides or luring children with false promises of finding parents. 1970s. Florida saw multiple women disappear after entering swamps, encountering fake law enforcement. A clean kick killer disguised his vehicle as a police car to rescue disoriented women. The seemingly helpful driver was actually a serial predator. Overplanning sometimes leads to detectable patterns, a vulnerability for organized criminals. Consistent tool usage, handkerchiefs, ropes, and brought weapons create traceable evidence. They meticulously remove weapons to avoid ballistic fingerprint evidence. Crime scenes get scrubbed of fingerprints, blood traces, and other forensic clues. Disfigurement and clothing disposal complicate victim identification for investigators. Therefore, vehicles serve as crucial clues in criminal profiling to identify perpetrator characteristics. Organized offenders typically use personal or victims' vehicles to facilitate evidence disposal. They often collect victim belongings like handbags, jewelry, clothing, and photos as trophies. These items are frequently discovered during suspect residence searches. The trophies fulfill fantasy needs rather than financial motives, serving as psychological rewards. These behaviors characterize organized offenders: meticulous planning, specific victim selection, and trophy retention. Disorganized offenders contrast sharply, selecting victims randomly without logical patterns. Their high-risk attacks often result in defensive wounds from victim resistance. Disorganized criminals show no victim preference, focusing only on quick incapacitation and anonymity. They neglect basic precautions like fingerprint removal due to poor planning. Using victims' own weapons and leaving them embedded creates easily traceable evidence. Disorganized offenders rarely collect souvenirs, differentiating them from organized counterparts. During frenzied attacks, they might take body parts or accessories as impulsive trophies. Personality traits further distinguish offender types. Organized types tend toward extroversion, while disorganized often went unnoticed in school settings. Organized criminals display calculated intelligence versus disorganized offenders' psychological abnormalities. Disorganized offenders exhibit deep insecurity, contrasting organized criminals' arrogant contempt for law enforcement. Mixed-type offenders combine characteristics of both categories, which we won't detail here. Which type poses greater danger? Which is more prevalent? Research suggests 66% of killers are organized, vs 33% disorganized. Ressler predicted rising organized crime rates due to social issues and weapon accessibility. This concludes our second section. Through profiling, we categorize serial killers into organized, disorganized, and mixed types. Organized offenders meticulously plan crimes with specific victim criteria. They control victims through manipulation and collect souvenirs, unlike random disorganized offenders. Currently organized offenders dominate. Ressler discovered serial killers' violent tendencies develop gradually. Their evil grows like seeds nurtured over time before manifesting. This leads to our third question. What creates serial killers? What childhood patterns emerge? First, their families often appear normal, but conceal instability. Contrary to belief, many come from middle-class families with psychiatric histories rather than poverty. Ressler's research reveals over 50% have family mental illness histories. Superficially stable families often hide psychological turmoil beneath. Example: vampire killer. Richard Chase inherited schizophrenia from his mother. Additionally, about half of these criminals have parents with criminal records. Approximately 70% of offenders have family histories of alcoholism or drug abuse. Nearly all exhibited childhood psychological issues that escalated into severe mental disorders. Second, many experienced maternal deprivation or childhood abuse, crippling their capacity for love and fostering violent tendencies. Research shows the mother-child bond during ages Roosevelt is crucial for developing emotional intelligence and empathy. Most offenders lack this foundational nurturing, leaving them emotionally stunted. Society pays the price for those incapable of love. One serial rapist mentioned assaulted 12 women before 19, directly linked to maternal neglect. After parental divorce at 7, his mother prioritized steps beggars while abusing him physically and emotionally. This traumatic childhood bred isolation and early criminal behavior, starting with theft. By 13, he faced arrest for joyriding. At 14, escalated to stealing lingerie and committing rape. Third, paternal absence condemns serial killers to isolated adolescence. Their inability to form healthy relationships, especially with women, fuels psychological distortion over time. Psychologists note female serial killers are exceptionally rare, limiting related studies, with most serial killers being white males aged 20-30. Proper paternal guidance during adolescence proves crucial. Adolescence shapes one's worldview and perception of surroundings. Paternal absence during this period can cause social dysfunction and distorted sexual perceptions in boys. Unlike normal individuals who view sex as love expression, they develop antisocial personality disorders. Some rapists dehumanize victims completely during assaults. Ressler documented a killer who began raping and murdering at 16. This premature baby, youngest of 4, showed early antisocial tendencies. Impoverished parents vented frustrations on children with distorted maternal affection. He shared a room with mother as human shield against alcoholic father, though not sharing beds. Treated as fragile pet yet abused, frequently abandoned to violent grandmother. Grandmother's temper led to physical abuse for minor disobedience. Elder brother escaped permanently after high school graduation. Remaining family used him as buffer against drunken father's violence. Adolescent rebellion manifested through beating mother over trivial matters like dog purchases. Escalated to lingerie, theft, and sister voyeurism. Later, recalling, "People saw me as monster, I bit back." Ressler concludes such killers murder from unrelieved existential loneliness. Psychological research identifies paternal absence as primary factor in loneliness-driven violence. This loneliness typically emerges between ages 8-12, becoming the primary catalyst for future homicidal behavior. Absent or disreputable fathers cause adolescent boys social embarrassment among peers. Thus, they withdraw from friends and avoid group activities like baseball teams or Boy Scouts. Traumatized boys develop worsening social skills and heterosexual relationship difficulties during adolescence. They increasingly rely on fantasy fulfillment, accelerating psychological distortion. Ultimately, their value systems become fundamentally antisocial. Not all troubled adolescents become serial killers. Exceptions exist. The author identifies pre-12 years as life's most crucial developmental phase. Childhood-formed issues often persist throughout adulthood. Positive influences like caring step-parents, teachers, or friends can mitigate childhood trauma. Early intervention by mental health professionals proves particularly effective. Experts identify root causes and implement targeted psychological interventions. This concludes our third section analysis. Serial killer origins typically trace to unstable childhoods and misguided adolescences. Common factors include parental neglect, abuse, social isolation, and unaddressed loneliness. Now let's summarize the book's key insights. 1. Criminal profiling scientifically analyzes crime scenes to identify suspects and narrow investigations. 2. Serial killers categorize into organized, disorganized, and mixed-type offenders through profiling analysis. Organized offenders meticulously plan crimes with specific victim selection criteria. They skillfully manipulate victims and collect personal items as trophies post-crime. Disorganized criminals act randomly without logical victim selection patterns. Third, serial killers typically endure traumatic childhoods marked by parental neglect, abuse, and social isolation that warp psychological development. Since Ressler established the FBI's Behavior Science Unit, criminal profiling has been both dramatized and mythologized in popular culture. Media often portrays profilers as supernatural crime solvers overshadowing regular police work, a notion Ressler refutes. Ressler clarifies in his book, profilers help narrow suspect pools, but apprehending killers relies on fine officers' investigative work. He emphasizes that the true driving force for law enforcement is alleviating victims' families' grief and fear through justice. This concludes our analysis of the FBI's psychological profiling ticked. Full notes are available below. Join us tomorrow for more insights.